Hey guys, I'm Ryan Christofferson with PSIA and AASI. I've been watching a lot of people get out and move or looking for ways to move indoors. So I thought I would take a minute to share some of my favorite indoor activities. The goal with this is not so much a workout, but more what is my body doing? And I think a lot of people, when we're getting feedback or we're trying to make changes in our own skiing and riding, we have a disconnect between what we think we're doing and what we're actually doing. And we can get a lot of feedback where we're out skiing and try to make those changes, or we can film ourselves and try to create alignment there. But another way that I'm a big fan of is through understanding sensations. So the activities that I'm going to run us through, they're connected to the fundamentals. So we'll move through the fundamentals, but it's really, like isolation. What do I feel when I'm doing something specific, and just starting to become aware of what we feel in our body, so that when we're out on snow, we can have some of those checkpoints. It's like an internal checklist, so when I'm skiing well, I should be feeling this. And on the other side of that, I'm going to run us through what it feels like when we're maybe not doing it ideally, so that we can recognize that as well. I hope you guys enjoy. All you need for this is, if you don't have anybody that you're quarantined at home with, you just need a wall and maybe a chair or one of these balance balls things that we've got, a camera or a mirror, so that you can kind of take just reading, make sure that we're kind of on par. But this is something that you can do alone, or if you've got a quarantine buddy to join you, that would be great as well. Hope you enjoy.
For my people that need to read, again, we're just trying to connect our bodies to those fundamentals, create some alignment, and how do our movements maybe affect some of those fundamentals. So let's jump on into it.
All right, so our ability to move along the length of the ski. This is my girlfriend Jessica. She's my quarantine buddy. So one thing that I like, or a handful of things that I like to do in here, is isolate the joints that allow us to move along the length of the ski. So go ahead and face me. So the first thing that I like to do is flex at just my ankles, right? And a lot of the time, so for my trainer friends or anybody that's working with people, you say bend at the ankles. A lot of times you get this. All right, so now not only did I bend at my ankles, I also bent my knees and my hips, right? But maybe all I want you to do is bend at your ankles, that Michael Jackson move, right? So go ahead, bend at the ankles. Now, what do we feel here? So for me personally, come back down here. So for me personally, like, I feel a stretch in my calves and in my hamstrings, but so that I don't bend at the knees and I don't break at the waist or in my core, I also feel my quads are engaging, probably my glutes, my low back, and just my core in general. Like, these are things that I feel, so that I flex just at the ankles and not at my knees and hips. So what is engaging? All right. So if you're doing this on your own, this is when the ball or the chair is going to come in handy. But if you have a quarantine buddy or a trust fall friend, what does it feel like to just bend at the knees, right? So as we just bend at the knees, we're trying not to let our ankles, knees go forward, right? So here, quick step, there you go. All right, so like here, when I bend just at the knees, right, it's not a normal position, it's kind of awkward. I feel like hamstrings, glutes, core firing, so that I don't continue to flex at the waist. But I also feel like my shins and my calves, trying to keep my shins relatively vertical in here. So what are we feeling? Like, what's firing as we isolate these things? And then that's where, like I said, if you don't have a buddy, grab your ball, roll it out. The goal is, my shins are relatively vertical. What is engaging here, so that I'm not saggy or I'm not overcooking it, but just so that that is stable. My ankles are neutral, so shins are vertical. What do you feel firing? All right. So we flexed just the ankles. That brings us forward. We flexed just the knees. That brings us backwards. Now we're going to flex just at the waist, right? So for me personally, I have a low back injury. I try to remove the spine flexion from this, right? So similar to our rotational fundamental, where we turn the legs against the stable upper body, we're going to be kind of similar here, right? So I'm trying to flex at the waist. Femurs stay vertical, pelvis is attached to my core and comes forward without me rounding here. So as we watch Jessica do it, the goal is not to open the ankles so that we actually, yeah, there you go. Like, it's kind of hard in that to not kick back, right? It's also hard not to flex in there. So how far can we really go? So like, you don't have to go as far, but don't let the hips come back. There you go. So now we might be in a limited range of motion. Whereas if, go ahead and do like a forward fold. Whereas if we do like a full-on forward fold, you see the ankles open up a little bit, the hips go back, or if you round your spine so that you can like touch the ground. You know, now we're flexing more in like, rather than just in the hips, right? We're flexing at the spine or the ankles and whatnot are opening up. So again, if we flex just at the ankles, come forward. Hi, Mr. Ziggy. So we move forward. When we flex at, hey buddy. When we flex at just the knees, we start to come back. Don't close your ankles. There you go. We start to come back. And then again, when we flex just in the hips, we start to move forward again. So what does that do to us when we're skiing?
So I think it's pretty clear. Find a wall, grab a buddy, just get in there. And again, like the goal is isolation. We're just trying to isolate these joints. What do you feel firing? So for those of you that are maybe not been a big sensation learner, this is a time to kind of just take a reading, grab a notebook, write down what you got going on. What are you feeling? This is also a good time to take note of your range of motion. You know, I'm a huge fan of building range of motion too, because I think that comes in later on in our skiing. But are my calves tight? Do I not have the ability to flex my ankles as much as I'd like? Do I not have the ability to flex in my hip socket as much as I'd like? So, I mean, those are other things that you can take account, and then we can not only understand, you know, what it feels like, but now we can start to take steps towards growing that flexion, growing that extension, and creating some internal stability, as well as developing more range of motion.
Right? So another one is, where does rotation come from? Right? Ideally, rotation comes from the legs, separate of the upper body, and we talk about the pelvis being part of that upper body. So it's the femurs rotating inside of that socket. But we also see a lot of upper body rotation, whole body rotation, which I might argue is either the upper body rotating first and having a lot of tension in the core so that the feet go quickly, or vice versa, where the feet might turn, but we don't have the discipline to separate the upper body yet, so the upper body goes with it. So like, that's kind of how I view whole body rotation. And then we have our ideal, where the lower body rotates first against that upper body. And again, knowing what upper body rotation feels like is good. If you've trained with me before, there's a good chance we've gone through and skied through some of these. Like, what does it feel like to turn with the upper body? How does that feel? What do we get? So what I'm looking at right now is we're just turning the upper body. Go the other way. Right, go back. Keep going. So eventually, the feet will start to turn, depending on how flexible you are in your spine and in your hips. Like, it might be farther for some people. If you're really tight, you don't stretch, you don't take care of your body in that way. You might be a little tighter, or you've had some injuries, you're a little tighter, so you may not have that range of motion, right? And then there's the whole body rotates. What does that feel like? You know, like for me right now, as I turn my feet to get my upper body to go, I feel tension in my core just to keep my core locked in with my hips. And then lower body, twisting the feet. You can step through it so that there's no friction, right? So for me, I feel tension in the core to keep this as an anchor, but what I feel firing in my legs, hello, Mr. Ziggy. What I feel in my legs is I feel if I'm making a turn to my left, I feel the inside of my right leg and the outside of my left leg. Those are what I personally feel. Again, doing this on your own and having an accountability buddy. So, you know, you can feel free to grab onto your hips and do it, but I still see a lot of people, when they grab onto their hips, they're still getting a little swingy. So if you have an accountability buddy, or maybe not, and you want to do some social distancing, you know, like, so if you're going to turn that way, then we can start to feel what, you know, isolate that. Because now I'm blocking, and as she goes the other way, I'm blocking her rotation. So that might give her the opportunity to feel that separation and that disconnect. And again, what does this feel like? Start to take notes. If you ought to write it down, great. If you need to look up the name of the muscle groups, that's fine. But those are some things that I like to feel. So when I know that I'm turning and I'm turning well, I have a internal checklist like, oh, I felt that, or I didn't feel that. I need to engage here. All right.
In the rotational one, I think, you know, I mean, the key for us is what does it really feel like to stabilize that pelvis so that I can turn the legs. Again, I'm a huge fan of knowing what it feels like when we're doing wrong. So when we are able to get back out on snow, go out and turn with your upper body. Go out and turn with your whole body. I wouldn't suggest doing that under the chairlift or when you're in uniform, you know, so that your coworkers don't think you're all of a sudden skiing funny. But yeah, just feel that. What does it do? I like to do this if you have carpet, grab a couple pieces of paper, so that you can put your feet on those and you have a relatively slick surface. Find a hardwood floor. If you have those little couch movers, those kinds of things, so that you can get a more frictionless environment. But it is good to know, what are you firing? How are you doing it? And just, again, what are you feeling? And what you're feeling now might be different later on as you kind of develop an understanding of this.
All right, so where does edging come from? A combination of inclination and angulation. So what does inclination look like? That's when we are just tipping over, we're staying stiff as a board, our body is in a whole line. So the spine, the femurs, the shin, they're all on the same line, right? What are we engaging when we do this? For me, like, I'm feeling that outer quad, and especially my side, on the side that's tipping over, I feel that just tight so that I don't get loose and go one direction or the other. So what is angulation? Angulation, for me, simply is when I have one part of my body doing something different than the other part. This is where it's really nice to have a wall, so that you can kind of feel this on your own. But so if I can show you guys, the goal for us is we're going to keep Jessica's spine vertical, but we're going to get her legs to shift over. So I'm going to hold her so that, there we go, as her spine stays more vertical and the legs come over. Bye, Ziggy. You know, what do I feel there? So when I'm tipping over like that, I feel my outer quad getting a stretch all the way up through the side of my hip into my obliques and intercostals. Like, I feel that happening there. But to keep my spine vertical, I'm also feeling a pinch on that inside, on the other side. So like my right side right now, I'm pinching in there while this side's elongating, right? Now, how can we work that lower down in the leg. Like we often talk about, good skiing things start lower, closer to the snow. So what does that feel like? Can I try to keep my femurs a little bit more, femurs and spine vertical, tip the shins over a little bit? Don't have a ton of range of motion here, but how can I isolate, start a little lower? And then we can go even lower than that. But I don't have ski boots on right now, so I can really feel my ankles move, trying to keep my shins up more vertical, but tipping the ankles over. And what do those feel like? What does it feel like to just engage at the ankles, at the knees, at the hips? And where do I feel my body trying to stabilize so that I can keep one part of my body doing something different than my other part of my body?
This is a good one if you don't have a friend, or even if you do have a friend, I would suggest finding a wall so that you can put your shoulders and hips up against the wall and walk your feet out so that you're making it so that your spine has to stay vertical when you're doing this. And then can you feel, what is stretching or what is contracting, which muscles are lengthening, and just work your way down. And again, we have a bigger range of motion in our upper leg, but in really good skiing, we often strive to get the lower leg to move first, and again, we don't have a ton of range of motion, and especially once we stick our foot inside that ski boot, we have even more limited range of motion. But can we start to create that separation in getting one part of our body to stay more vertical or go a different direction than the other part of the body without overstraining ourselves? We don't want to injure ourselves, but how can we create those angles internally?
Direct pressure towards the outside ski is another one of our fundamentals. So we do it all day, like we pick up a foot. You can do this with me. We pick up a foot, right? What does that feel like? Where do I need to stabilize to make it a challenge? Is, a lot of times when we pick up a foot, we lean over and it's like, yeah, I'm leaned over to pick that up. How can I minimize that lean so that I'm still on, my foot, but I'm not way out over here? Like, what am I stabilizing? And for me personally, I feel that in my upper quads. I'm feeling that all around it. That's my stabilizer. And I'm also feeling, again, kind of back to when I had my heels and my hips against the wall and leaning forward, I feel my foot gripping. I've got my slippers on right now, so like they're not gripping, but we've all felt that. Like, what do we do? What does it feel like? But it's also good to know what it feels like when I do it in maybe not an ideal way, right?
So when watching that again, actually made me think of something. When I'm doing that statically and I'm doing it well, I feel my big toe, my little toe, and my heel anchored in. I know a lot of us, when we're out there teaching, we'll talk about how we move across the ski, and some people will be, go from the little toe to the big toe and then back again. So I also think it might be a way to challenge yourself with this exercise specifically is, what does it feel like to be able to lift up your foot and anchor all three of those points, big toe, little toe, heel? What does it feel like to pull the pinky toe up a little bit so that we're on our big toe and our heel without swinging one way or the other? And then vice versa. Can I pull my big toe up a little bit, keep my little toe and my heel anchored? But again, let's limit the movement. We're not trying to lean one way or the other. So just find ways to challenge it. And then how do they feel, but how do they feel different?
All right, so regulating the magnitude of pressure coming from the ski to the snow is another fundamental of ours. And it's hard to replicate that when we're not on snow or we're not jumping around. But I think knowing our range of motion that we have vertically is important and plays a good role in this. So go ahead and turn sideways. So, yep, there you go. Now, I want you to flex at the ankles, knees, and hips, but get as low as you can. Like, how low can you go, right? So we can get pretty low, but is this a good spot to be skiing in? Probably not. And I'm guessing that her weight right now is probably more on the heels, or she could shift forward a little bit and she could be on her toes. But it's hard to be anchored on the big toe, the little toe, and the heel all at the same time. So we want to maintain that interaction inside of our boot. So do the same thing, but now flex ankles, knees, and hips. And how low can you get while you still maintain a good connection with the big toe, the little toe, and the heel all on there, right? So it's low, but not as low as she got. So where is her low? Right there. All right, now stand up. That's our tall, right? Like that's about as tall as we can get. You know, I mean, you can't really do that in your ski boot. So that's our tall. Now let's find the middle of, so get back to your low, right? Not your low, but your low where you still got your big toe, little toe, and heel. There you go. So those are connected. Now let's come up a little bit, not all the way, but let's find that middle zone, and let's find it so that, yeah, right there, that's actually good. If you look, her back and her shins, almost, there we go. So like that's a good middle range of motion for her right there. That's kind of the middle. So now come up, now find middle again, right? And then do a check. Are your shins and your back matching, or are you a little over, there you go. Or you a little over flexed, right? So like finding that again. Now find your low without going past it. Right? So knowing this range of motion, and then find, yep, right, you find your middle. Yep. So like knowing that, you can stand, you can rise. So knowing your range of motion vertically, I think is something that plays into effect there. Like we've all overflexed, ended up either too far forward or too far back, had the skis get away from us, or we went forward. Or maybe being too tall. I'm not utilizing enough range of motion. Might see that in the bumps. Somebody's like, oh, you got to flex and extend in there. And you're like, I am. And you're really just, yeah. Like, so knowing where your tall is, that's easy. We stand there a lot. But knowing where your effective low is, how low can you get but still have good connection in the front of the boot and the back of the boot, so that I don't overcook it and land on my heel, or my heel comes up and I'm on my toes. And then also know where is the middle of my range of motion, so that I can have that checkpoint. And when I'm skiing, and if I'm in the middle, I know that I've got room to get smaller or room to get taller. So just knowing where we are in there can help us when we're dealing with the forces that come from the ski to the snow.
This one has always been kind of a favorite of mine, because when I'm out working with people, training people, going for their level 2 or their level 3, you know, I mean, I think it's important that we utilize our range of motion. We have it, you know. I mean, I always use the example of a downhill mountain biker. For any of you that do downhill mountain biking, you know, you've got front and rear shocks that are, you know, somewhere between 8 and 10 inches. Are you using the whole shock, you know, or are you just using a little bit of it, you know? So how much do we have to use so that we can use it when we need to? We don't always need to use it, but I mean, there's plenty of times where, you know, I mean, it'd be nice to know if I've got a little bit more that I can get, you know, flex a little bit more without putting myself in a place I don't want to be, or, you know, I've got a little bit of room to lengthen here that's going to just keep that ski on the snow the way I want to. So like I play with this one a lot, and yeah, get to know that range of motion. I often have people close their eyes when we're out on snow, and, you know, I'll put them in their position and then have them close their eyes and try to find that again. And just, again, we're trying to connect ourselves to what we think our body's doing and where we think our body is to where it really is.
Thanks for joining me. I hope this was helpful. Again, the takeaways I want you guys really is just, what are you feeling? Let's start to align that image of what we think we're doing with what we're really doing, bring it in together. And it's just something that in my career as a ski instructor and a trainer, that has helped me grow personally, but has also been a tool that I've used with folks that I work for, that helps them when they leave a clinic or they finish up a season, or they're in an exam situation where they're getting feedback and they're able to just be able to address it right then and there. These are all things that I've found very valuable for that. Segue, the next video will probably be, like, some of us might have realized that we were tight in certain areas or didn't have the range of motion that we would hope for. So some of my favorite exercises and activities that I do either at the end of a ski day to stretch out or to gain some strength, mobility, and the ability to help myself isolate certain areas when I need to. Hope you guys are all staying safe and having fun, getting out and moving when you can, and I'll see you soon.